evening, guys. We're going to get started here. So we are React Alliance. That's who we represent. We are a grassroots 501c3 nonprofit. There are 7 board members, including myself. We also have Mandy Davis, Nicole Dorfman, and Sherry Weaver. There's 3 others as well. There is Sarah Rizzo, who is also a member of Avila. We have Betty Winholtz, and we also have Andrea Luger. We are a very diverse group of local citizens. We are very different from each other. We have a bunch of different political affiliations, I would say. Discussing politics on our board of directors would probably be labeled as an extreme sport. It's just something to know, because I think that we often get a question, right? Well, what would the other solution be? Because we all came together to be united for one cause, and that one cause is to stop the offshore wind project, which is AB 525. Our mission is to protect our coasts from offshore wind. We are here to educate the public. We are here to advocate for informed decision making. We are here to mobilize the community. We are here to potentially pursue legal action if necessary. And we are also here to work with governing agencies and collaborate with them. So that is our focus. Same thing goes, right? If we were to talk about solutions other than this project, it would also probably be an extreme sport. So just something to be aware of there, because we get that question once in a while. We do personally recognize outside of React Alliance that there are an array of other solutions available, but again, that's personal and separate from React Alliance. We have had some sound bites recently, which have been pretty entertaining, from some outlets, which are of course not true. I think my favorite one so far has been that we're funded by Big Oil. That's hilarious, because if anyone knows what they're talking about, they'll realize that Big Oil is wind. So you'll see as we go through our presentation that they are very intertwined, and yeah, it's a funny thing to say. Same thing with whether we're being, radically right as far as politics go, or potentially we are spreading myths. So we really like to be very transparent. We are very upfront. We hold ourselves accountable. So if anyone wants to play Mythbusters, we are down for that. we really like open and honest communication. We'll be doing a Q&A at the end here. So if you guys have questions, we'll be more than happy to answer those for you. So let's go ahead and dive in.
Hey, you guys. You know what? Can you hear me? Yeah. And I work as a guy. I work outside. I'm really used to projecting. So if you can't hear me, let me know and I'll dial it up a notch. So we are presenting this PowerPoint, Central Coast Offshore Wind, Impacts and Consequences. And we will be dividing this presentation into 3 different sections. We'll be talking, and those sections each have their own set of impacts and consequences to those impacts. So hopefully this will help you to understand the project and the process and what it is we have to be concerned about. Next. So very simply, just as an introduction, there is a offshore wind lease area that's 376 square miles, about 20 miles west of Cambria, San Simeon. That is the lease that was finalized in December of, I believe it was 2022. And it is, you can see the area right there. And it is not the only lease area in California right now. There's another one in Northern California off of Humboldt, but we'll just be talking about the Central Coast lease area. What you do need to understand is this is just the beginning in their eyes. What they have slated for the future is, especially in Northern California, over 4,483 square miles of offshore wind project. That's a heck of a not just along the Pacific. Oregon has their own problems, Washington has their own. That's just slated by our state for production. And what I would like you guys to realize is, you know, people talk about windmills and they're going, oh yeah, well, it's not that big of a deal, because they drive by the really old wind farms, and those are pretty small, etc. These are huge. You know, to call them a wind farm is really, really, you know, it's great. It's spin, and people go, oh, it's a farm, that's all it is. These are gigantic. They're over 1,000 feet tall. The blades are well over 600 feet. And what they do is they take up, these are floating turbines, and they take up an entire square mile of ocean space. So they have slated over 300 wind turbines just in that small area that we showed you on the map. And they will be visible from shore. If somebody tells you that they aren't, I'm sorry, it ain't true. Next. Here is one of the things that I'm constantly pointing out to people is that they could not have placed this technology, this wind farm, in a worse place. It is smack dab in the middle of two major migration patterns, one for marine mammals, and most especially for cetaceans. The other is on the Pacific Flyway, and it will impact avian species, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, both of them. But that is the situation. It also happens to be right in the middle of one of the richest marine ecosystems on Earth, and it is just north, creating basically a downwind situation for and I'm sure many of you have heard about persistent upwellings, which basically bring up this amazingly rich upwelling of food, which provides food for the entire marine ecosystem in the area. And what it does is it reduces that. We'll talk about that later. Next. So the three companies that have leased this area are Equinor, Golden State Wind, and Ive Energy. And I just wanted to show you this because take a look at who owns and are major investors in these companies. The majority of them are not here in the United States. They are offshore. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Anyway, they are offshore, and they the majority of a lot of the wind companies are literally owned by oil companies. The only one that is local here is in the United States, is Ive Energy, and their major investor is BlackRock. Next. Okay, so this is one of our current ads. We have a whole ad campaign that's in there. And this says oil keeps wind afloat, and subsidies are the driving force. So as you can see, what we were just talking about is oil does keep wind afloat. They invest in it. They are heavily invested in it. But there's also a dynamic where when the wind is not operating, then bottom line is those fossil fuel power plants go into overdrive. They're called peaker plants. And so these oil companies are making money on both sides of the equation. Big deal. Next. Okay, so I'm going to go into the pre-construction aspects of offshore wind. And they are actually have started doing, the very first company that has started to get their permits is Equinor. They are well known to be energy bullies. And they have done so on the East Coast consistently, and they're the ones that are heading out and they are driving as hard as they can and pushing the process. So they are the first ones to start the pre-construction phase. They have one permit in the bag, and what is going on right now is there are offshore deepwater surveys that are happening. This is a picture of a survey boat, and those survey boats are, upwards of 300 feet. They make an incredible amount of noise just operating, with the thrusters, with the constant prop, and just the amount of noise that they make from an anthropogenic standpoint is pretty significant. Next. So the survey vessels are not things that are going to be, that even you would want to be in the water, because human beings at 160 decibels in the water are basically can kill you. So these are really high decibel levels. They are very, very damaging. And what's really interesting is none of the permitting agencies so far, one permit has been issued out of probably a total of 30 coming up in the future if they get that far, and they're not going to. But the agencies are not demanding monitoring, and they are not requiring that, that there is any kind of verification that they're staying within the decibel levels, they're staying within the frequencies, and that they are not doing damage to the marine environment. Next. So this is just kind of a fun little, diagram. There's a survey boat, and it shows a couple of the different kinds of standing. What these guys are doing is, why are they doing the high resolution geographical surveys? They are surveying the bottom of the ocean. They are looking for anchoring sites. They are looking for sites to be able to run the high energy cables from the turbines and the substations into shore. And they are scanning the bottom of the ocean with very high decibels, up to 228. So the scans, we've got the little bubbler there, they drag along, and there's a side scan. Anyway, that's just kind of sort of extra information for you guys. Next. So the impacts of these HRG surveys are significant. And the feds will tell you otherwise. The people, the wind companies will tell you otherwise. And so will our own state government. Because they really don't want folks to know how much this is going to damage our oceans here locally. And, right here, these guys have been given permission to run at 228 decibels. 160 decibels causes significant damage to marine mammals, marine life. It can basically implode some of their organs. They can have emboli. There can be lots of damage to their pulmonary system, and to their hearing. And everybody's heard the expression, a death whale is a dead whale. Well, it's true. And so this will damage those very, very sensitive hearing organs that are so important to these animals, not just cetaceans, seals, otters, anything that lives in the ocean is very dependent upon their hearing. 270 will kill fish. Not 270, 207, and 217 will kill the base of the food chain, larval forms. That's pretty intense, you guys. Next. So, I know this is kind of a funny picture, but it is meant for you to think about really a sound. Most of us cannot even begin to imagine what 228 decibels is. And keep in mind, with each one of those decibel levels, every 10, it's not just an increment of 10, it is a times 10. So 160 decibels is quite different than 220 decibels by many, many factors. But if you want to stop to think about, and these surveys, those noises, basically what they are doing is it's constant for weeks, days on end, day in, day out, at nighttime as well, every 10 seconds. And these animals are having to withstand that kind of noise that is constant, that is in some instances, like in an estuary or in a semi-closed system, is next to impossible to get away from. So take a look at, right here it says, what is that, 180, which is a rocket launch, and that would render somebody, if you were really close to it, deaf. That's only 180 decibels, you guys. So just stop to consider what these animals are having to endure. Next. So the HRG surveys, they can cause significant behavior changes, even at lower decibels, i.e., those boats just running their thrusters and going back and forth through the water like they do to do their surveys. But they can change their breeding behaviors. If it is loud and they're actually doing the surveys and it does destroy their hearing, they will not be able to feed. It will disrupt almost every single aspect of their lives. Next. So it's during this phase of a wind project that these companies have to get what is called an IHA or an ITP, and one is an incidental take permit, and the other one is an incidental harassment. Authorization. I'm honestly, I ask you guys every time. I cannot remember that word. And it is harassment is a lovely word. From a semantic standpoint, it's a very unlovely word when it comes to biology and what these animals have to basically deal with. And harassment means anything from just kind of bothering them and they're going, I don't really like this, all the way to destroying them, to killing them. There are two levels, level A, level B, and I don't need to go into those details, but harassment isn't just bugging an animal. It can mean killing them, and it is during this phase that they have to get those. On the East Coast, they have gotten in IHAs, and the numbers of animals that are listed on this are mind-blowing. Sometimes it is up to 50% of the current population in the area. So they are literally being given the big okie dokie by the government to potentially kill hundreds, if not thousands of animals. And these are the animals we're talking about. We have our wonderful sea turtles, we have our elephant seals, we have our southern sea otters, so many different kinds of species of whales that are coming through this area, especially right now, the gray whales that have migrated through with their babies, the humpbacks, the blue whales, many of those cetacean species that live here, the minke whales and the common dolphins, the white-sided and the rizzos. All of these animals are going to be on that list, and they will be damaged. Next. This one is referring to, most of us have probably heard what's going on the East Coast, where lots of dead whales are washing up on the beach. And this is actually an old slide. This is saying 470 have died. Anyway, I don't need the slide to talk to you about it, but that number keeps increasing literally on a daily basis. Our government is saying, and the incidence of these mortalities is something that cannot be ignored. Maybe you'll hear people when they don't want to deal with the data that's there, they will say correlation does not mean causation. So they can just go, oh, well, you don't have absolute proof, you didn't actually watch it happening, you can't prove it. But here's the deal, from a statistical standpoint, the higher the correlation, and this correlation is way above 65% in many of the locations that they have found these animals. If you have that high of a correlation where those animals are washing up on shore, where they're doing the surveys, I'm sorry, but you have a very, very good argument for causation. And that's currently what's going on there. It's currently what is being utilized for the people who say, well, no, there's no proof that these guys are being killed by surveys. But the correlation is high, the causation is there. Next. This is another one of our ads, and it is something that, I really want to kind of end my segment with, is we are facing some really, really big decisions here. These guys think that we cannot stop them. And we are being told by many of our politicians that this is a done deal. This is what they want us to believe. And if we believe this and we do not take action on ourselves, this is what we're looking at. We are looking at making this choice. Do we want to live with a wonderland? Or do we want to make the wrong choice and not fight it and live with wasteland?
No?
I'm Sherry Leeper. I got involved with this because my husband's a commercial fisherman, and he's president of the Morro Bay Commercial Fishermen's Organization. And we've been dealing with offshore wind coming since 2015, so for 9 years. And so I've learned every step of the phase, from where they're going to put it, and all their plans along the way. And this is why it's called React Alliance, because it's the commercial fishermen aligning with the environmental community, which doesn't happen very often. But it's working, and we just really appreciate how much this group has done to really spread the word, because we've been kind of doing it for ourselves for a while. I'm going to talk about the construction phase. And so once they're done with the site surveys, they have to present a construction operation plan to BOEM. This is when you guys can speak up and say, no, we don't want it, oppose it, before they go forward, because they have to get permission before they go forward. So there's going to be a lot of issues before they can even think about getting started, because there's so many problems with port infrastructure and grid connection. They don't have the ships. I am not even sure why they started site surveys already, because they don't even know if they have all of this and the money that it costs to do it. But they still went ahead with damaging site surveys. It was the cart before the horse, as far as we're concerned. So this is a picture of the substation that they have on the East Coast. We're going to have a similar one. It's big enough for helicopters to land on. Nicole's going to talk about it more later. Okay, next slide. They're going to put the turbines in first, and then they're going to hook up the cables. The way they're going to hook up the cables is they're going to have sets of like 10 turbines hooked together with 300 megawatt cables. Because it's floating, it's 3,600 feet out there. On the East Coast, it's 300 feet. But our shelf drops off really fast. So they have to do the floating, which is all new technology. There's only like 5 in the whole world. The ones that they do have don't work. They had some in Scotland that lasted 4 months, so they don't even have the technology. But anyway, so they're going to connect them with these mid-water cables, which is important because they can't bury them, because they're moving back and forth. They have to have these flexible cables. They haven't even developed those yet. But it's damaging to have mid-water cables because things can get tangled on them. They emit heat, and they're vulnerable to the ocean environment. So then they're going to go to these big substations. We showed you a picture of the substations, which are going to be very visible for shore. And then they're going to be exported with this big 1,200 megawatt export cable that will come right into Morro Bay, right where the surfers and swimmers are. And that's kind of scary. I mean, you get shocked by that, you're not going to survive. And they come unburied all the time. That's a big problem. They've had over 90 failures of cables in the last 7 years in Europe. So there's lots of problems with them. Next slide. So they're going to have to tie them down, tether them down with rope, synthetic rope, but also a lot of chain. And because it's so deep, and because there has to be what they call scope, which is the amount of line they need for when the waves come up and when they go down. So the scope is 7 or 9 to 1. It's 3,600 feet deep. So multiply that by 7 or 9. It's about 3 miles. So each tether is 3 miles long. That's a lot of chain and line in the water. And they're going to need at least 3 or 4 lines on each one. And they're going to electrolyze and have to be changed out all the time. So where are they going to put all this old chain? It's very expensive. There's a lot of maintenance costs. The other problem is So when the waves go down, that extra scope line is dragging on the bottom. So it'll be scouring the bottom. And where they're putting these wind farms is actually restricted from bottom fishing because it's in an area of an ancient sea coral. It's called essential fish habitat. So it's not good. Okay, next slide. So the cables, they're going to be coming into the near shore, and this is a picture of the marine protected areas that were put in 2007. And right here is Avila power plant. They're planning on putting a cable into Diablo. Diablo can carry 7 gigawatts, and the Morro Bay power plant can carry 3 gigawatts. So they're very interested in getting, in connecting to Diablo. That's the main reason that they're even doing it off our coast is because we have this grid connection. So that's an issue because when they bury these cables, they use these jet plows that use 12,000 gallons of water per minute. And they have to bury these cables at least 6 to 20 feet deep. If they don't bury them, then they have to top them with concrete blankets or rocks. So it's a problem that when they do that and bury them, they spew all this dirt and cause all this turbidity and cover spawning grounds, breeding grounds. They resuspend forever chemicals and leads. So it's just a bad thing, and it shouldn't be allowed in a marine protected area. The ports that they're going to need, California is not really set up for, the coastline isn't really set up well for offshore wind. I don't know if you've ever been to Europe or even the East Coast, but they have these large inlets. I mean, it takes a cruise boat half a day to get in. And on each side, it's flanked with flat land area. It's ideal for the construction and operation of offshore wind because these blades are 650 feet long. And the towers, and there's just a lot of large equipment that has to be stored and piled up to assemble them. So because California has nothing like that, we're going to have to spend billions of dollars to make it happen. So they're going to start with Long Beach and Humboldt. So they're going to have to totally redo Humboldt. They'll have to dredge out, I can't remember how many tons of sand, and wreck all the eelgrass, and do whatever they got to do up there. And then they're going to do Long Beach as well. And Long Beach is over 250 miles away. So they're going to end up having to tow all these things up once they're assembled in Long Beach. So what's going to happen is eventually they're going to need something local. Okay, next slide. So they're looking at, with Morro Bay, likely doing at least a new industrial port for crew transfers. This is a rendition that Reach did. That puts this big cement platform right there in front of the stacks. You can see the stacks up there in the corner. Also note the oil, the storage. They're going to need a lot of that because each turbine takes like 800 gallons of oil that has to be changed out yearly. Another big maintenance cost. And where are they going to put all that old oil or the replacement oil? They're gonna have it in Morro Bay or somewhere. Okay, next slide. And then they have big plans for Avila too. This is what they're looking at. They want to do what they call wet storage of the bases. Those bases will be huge. They fit into a football stadium. They're so huge. And they're going to have to put a breaker in, a mile-long breaker. And then they'll put this huge floating cement platform in for all, the blades and the towers and stuff, so they can fix them. They're gonna have to do something because they'll have these 300-foot long SOVs doing the maintenance. And if there's a big storm or they break down, they can't go all the way to Long Beach. They're gonna have some kind of port to go to in emergencies. So, next slide. So the build-out cost, the estimated cost for the existing port infrastructure is $11 to $12 billion. And then you add the upgrades to Morro Bay and Port San Luis, that's $6 billion. And then for the future transmission line grid connection for AB 525 goals, it's $41 billion. Because there's a big problem up north. So our California's grid is set up with what they call a backbone right through the middle of California. And everything, if it's going to go to LA or San Francisco or San Diego or whatever, it has to connect to that to be transported down. So up in Humboldt, Eureka, where they want to put 75% of these wind turbines actually, they have no grid connection. So they're going to have to go through hundreds of miles of forest to do that. Either that or this subsea cable along the nearshore, which would be terrible for fishing too. So, but it's going to be at a huge cost. This is why Morro Bay is first too, because there's just nowhere even close to getting that done. And then the funding for this will be our tax dollars, yay! And they're going to be putting this bond measure on in November for $1 billion to kickstart offshore wind. It's going to be a drop in the bucket. It won't get anywhere but someone's pocket. It's not going to do enough to do anything. So I would vote no on that. So it's going to be funded from private investment firms and developers, manufacturers, and port owners. Not the wind companies. No, it'll be us. And the cost, they estimated in this report, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory report, the cost of 1 gigawatt of offshore wind is $5 billion, making the 25 gigawatts that California wants a cost of $125 billion. And just so you know, we're $70 billion in debt right now. So I don't know where they're going to get that money from. Next slide. So this is another slide from our ad campaign. Not green, not sustainable, not renewable. The blade waste will be 2.2 million tons. The large carbon footprint from the port and large vessel operations will be a problem. There will be a high risk of oil leaks. There's electromagnetic field leakage from the cable failures. There's also something called sulfur hexafluoride that's used in the installation of the cables. It has a warming potential. The warming potential is 23,000 times higher than CO2. And also the big thing, constant noise pollution. The turbines will be 120 decibels. Plus, the site surveys and the construction and all that, which leads to stress to the animals. They'll be able to hear the turbines underwater 2 miles away when they're operational. So what is green? So I'm going to end with, we need to defend the environment principle. Processes that cause one environmental problem but causes another should be avoided.
We're going to talk about operations. So now it's been constructed and now the turbines are operating. Let's hope that doesn't happen, but should it happen, here is what we're going to do. So one of the things that Mandy spoke about is one of the main problems of the siting of these wind turbines is that they are in the middle of the Pacific Flyway, which is a migrating pathway for hundreds of species of birds, and it has been for millennia. And it is millions of migrating birds each year visiting our local estuary. The tips of these blades can go up to 170 miles per hour. So the birds will literally just be sucked in. And if you actually look at, there's images online where you can see of wind turbines, and very often they have lots of black stains along the top of them, and I can only assume that that's what causes it. They're at great risk from harm from these turbines. They cannot go around it. This is part of their DNA. Oh, another thing that, I can't remember if it was Mandy or Sherry said it, that the bait fish is attracted to structures. So you will actually have a lot of fish, potentially, near the structures that the birds want to go for. So it's just a disaster waiting to happen. Next. Mandy also spoke a little bit about this upwelling process. I won't go into it a whole lot, but you know, in the natural world, there are processes and dynamics which humans know very little about, but they actually have tremendous impact on the natural world. The government and the researchers have acknowledged that these turbines could potentially create upwelling diminishment by 15%. So what that means for life in the ocean is anybody's guess, but it doesn't sound good to me. And beyond that, I know people are very concerned about rising temperatures in the ocean. This will cause the ocean temperature to rise because it's diminishing the capacity of the cooler, deeper water to come up and mix with the warmer surface water. So not helping the problem. Next, please. We talked quite a bit about cables. Sherry talked at length about cables. They have numerous problems. I did a little bit of research today before coming here, specifically regarding the cables. In just the past 7 years, 90 subsea cables failed, totaling over 350 million euro in insurance claims. And it's interesting if you just do research, offshore wind cable failures, the most documents that come up are about insurance, because this is going to be a huge issue for the wind energy people, because they need to insure these products because they are breaking all the time. So I'm hoping that's going to be a breaking point for them, that the insurance companies are going to realize, well, this is crazy, we can't insure this. And in fact, one of these industry papers says a wind farm with 100 kilometers of power cable, which these all will have much more than that, it has a 30% chance of failure in any given year. 30%. Okay, so now imagine these turbines are out there operating, and we're dependent on them for our energy. And you've got a 30% chance of it not working properly. Doesn't seem like a good investment of all those billions of dollars that we talked about earlier. Okay, there's great, floating substations. This is another big issue. By the way, these are all experimental. They do not even have prototypes, but we know that they're saying that they will need a whole lot of these substations. So let's see, for every, so about 150 turbines would require 5 substations. So about 1 substation for every 30 turbines. Wow. So for this, just the beginning here, they're talking about approximately 200. So that's about 6 or more substations. They will be close to shore. Like you drive down to Santa Barbara and you see those oil derelicts out there, you can imagine that. We'll need at least 6 of them right along the central coast here. These can be big enough to land a helicopter on. And they're also proposing that they use a banned technology called once-through cooling. But they've renamed it something else. So even if you know that term, when they talk about it, they're going to talk about it with a different term, although it's the same thing. The reason is because these cables get so hot must be kept cool and all the equipment has to stay cool. So they just want to cycle in the ocean water, millions of gallons. And of course, when it gets cycled in, it kills larvae, kills small fish, and so on. So here it is, the proposed ones through cooling. It's not yet developed, and it's highly visible from shore. Not something I want to be looking at, and I imagine not anything y'all want to be looking at. Next. So, there will be a tremendous impact on commercial and recreational fishing for various reasons. There will be loss of fishing grounds, tremendous navigational hazards. The radar does not work in the wind turbines, so it's very dangerous. I actually heard that the Coast Guard has already said that they will have to limit operations significantly because they cannot go into those areas. Helicopters certainly can't be rescued in those areas. There'll be lots of fishing opportunities. So let's say we take over Port San Luis and Morro Bay Harbor for these industrial ports. Where are the fishing boats going to dock? They are going to be priced out. Increased ship traffic and competition for dock space. It's going to be dangerous. And if these surveys continue, where are the fish going to be? So it's, and another thing, folks, is that the fishermen, it's like that's our food source. We can eat the fish. We can't eat this other stuff. So then where does our fish come from? I love going down to our local fish market and getting fresh fish. It's beautiful. And so if there's no local fishing, we get our fish from where? From China? I mean, literally, consider this. You're going to be buying fish from an international broker because we can no longer fish off our very productive waters. Okay, next, please. So basically what we've been talking about, the offshore wind industry will negatively impact our current thriving tourist-based economies. I live in Morro Bay and our economy is absolutely dependent on tourism, and I imagine that Avila Beach is as well. So you can imagine even just a slight dip in your tourist economy can have a massive impact on your town and how it functions and how it provides for all of the people who live here and want to come and visit. Next. Another thing that we are extremely concerned about is the cost of energy. Cost of energy is already quite high in California. I think maybe we're second after Hawaii for the price of energy. According to the National Resources Energy Lab, which is part of the federal government, they are saying that we're currently at $40 per megawatt hour. They're projecting it will go up to $145 per megawatt hour. Another place I've seen, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, who is the federal government, that it will triple. Another estimate from Europe and the East Coast also shows 3 to 5 times that it's already gone up. So we can expect at least 3 times the amount. I have a friend who has a place in Scotland where they have some of those wind farms. He said he got a bill for $1,000, folks, for 1 month of energy. This is going to create a tremendous havoc, energy poverty. We think we have a problem now with housing being expensive, with homelessness being a problem. I don't know how anybody affords their energy on top of their rent if we move forward with this. Next, please. So, one of the things that we're often asked is, if this is all true what you're saying, then why aren't these environmental agencies standing up? Why aren't they saying something? And, it's a really sad thing to report to you, but in my research, it's become evident that these organizations, most who I've donated to most of my life, and more, have all been captured by the energy industries. So for example, we're talking about the whale deaths on the East Coast. And one of the things you'll hear the federal officials say, state officials say, well, there's absolutely no evidence to tie offshore wind to these whale deaths. And you know what? They're correct. There isn't evidence. And why is that? because they refused to do the studies, okay? So for example, the Atlantic Marine Conservation Society is an environmental organization that was contracted by the federal government to analyze recent whale deaths on the East Coast. With just a few necropsies, which is a study they do on dead animals, with just a few of them, they determined that all the deaths are caused by ship strikes. Offshore wind has nothing to do with it, and many others are undetermined. So how could they actually, after just a handful of necropsies, determine that none of them were caused by offshore wind? Well, I'll tell you why. Because of their 16-member board of directors, at least 12 have direct conflicts of interest and financial profit motive with the wind companies. For example, one person on their board is actually the strategic environmental affairs manager for Equinor Wind, who's the first group out in the water here. They also have a director of Grid Ventures, a company that invests in, contracts, and operates clean energy projects. They have the CEO of a clean energy storage company, the CEO of a steel construction supply. These are the folks who are supposed to be caring about the whales, okay? And I'll just give you one more example, maybe two. The Sierra Club is one of the groups way out front, calling people like us, misinformation spreaders, that we're being funded by the oil industry, and so on. But you have to know that they have received hundreds of millions of dollars from organizations and so-called philanthropic organizations who are funded by these interests that wish to promote and profit from offshore wind. In fact, they want to transform how industries are powered. One more, which is close to me, the NRDC. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, the National Resource Defense Council out of New York. My sister actually worked there back in the 90s. And they used to actually sue polluters. So they went after and successfully litigated against GE, DuPont, for poisoning and polluting the rivers, and they forced them to clean it up. Okay, I'm right behind that. But what are they doing now? Well, their mission has changed, unbeknownst to me, the donor, from wildlife, protecting wildlife and nature. Now that is the fourth goal behind climate change, equity and justice, and human health. Okay? Furthermore, the website claims that they are actively advocating for better tax provisions for clean energy while working to eliminate fossil fuels, and their CEO happens to be on a board where he partners with businesses and governments to change the way the world uses energy. One of their top priorities is the global growth of offshore wind. Okay, so we cannot trust these people to do what we've always been told that they're doing, because they're not anymore. Okay, next. Okay, and I'm going to turn the mic back over to Melissa.
So despite this extensive development, Bellum themselves anticipates that proposed action will have no measurable influence on climate change. This has been said in a few different places, which should lead us to question what the benefits would be if we are contradicting the entire point of this, right? The whole point, all their slogan essentially is, well, this combats climate change, right? And we have to hurry and we have to install these. That's the narrative. Then why is Bellum saying that it will have no measurable influence? So why would we do that if it's something that's completely unfounded, especially something that you guys can tell is such a horrible thing to do to our environment, our communities? That should tell you, right? It's profit. There's companies that are making a ton of money on this. There's no benefit. Next slide. We definitely need to work together to challenge the initiatives of prioritizing the profit over well-being, the effects of this on not just the marine ecosystems, because when we realize that we're messing with the marine ecosystems, we're messing with everything. It's all tied together, right? If you mess with that, it will bleed into other things. It's really important that we demand accountability together. We need to make sure that we're ensuring the development does not come at a cost of sustainability. Next slide. So in examining these array of issues, it's very clear that any sort of benefits are very outweighed by the extreme costs and the risks. We can either choose to have a sunset that's marred by industrial structures, or we can choose to preserve our natural beauty and our, ecological, our nature. There's a really stark contrast between sustainable conservation efforts and industrial interventions. Keep in mind too, this isn't only on the Central Coast, right? We've mentioned to you guys, we are focusing on this is happening to our community, but this isn't just the coast it's not just the Central Coast, it's all up and down California that will be affected by this. 85 to 5 stands to profit, while our community bears the cost. Energy expenses will soar, and landscapes will be industrialized. Our communities will lose their livelihoods. Think about the people that are involved in tourism, and that's their life, right? Think about the people who are fishermen, and that is literally their life. Moreover, the ecological damage is going to be profound. Our vibrant oceans and the life they harbor are going to be facing devastation from this. It's not just about preserving the views, it's about safeguarding our communities and the future ecological balance. Remember, as Mandy mentioned, this is not a done deal. This is what they want you to think, right? This is happening, the survey started, we can't do anything about it, but we absolutely can. History has shown that with community action, and if we work together, we can absolutely stop things like this. We can halt projects, we can change policies. It's happened in other places. By coming together and staying informed, and voicing our concerns, we can definitely ensure that the community environment is not sacrificed for an ineffective, unreliable energy source. Next slide. Well, yours. So we just wanted to give a big thank you to you guys for coming out and your willingness to learn more. We would really love it if you could join React Alliance. If you go to our website, you can learn more how to be involved. Better yet, when you go to our website, if you scroll down, you can join our mailing list. And just joining our mailing list will give you regular updates on what's going on, and it'll also give you the opportunity to understand how you can help. We are a grassroots, this is a grassroots effort. So as lovely as a giant check from the wind companies giving us a check to destroy themselves sounds amazing, that's not happening. So grassroots effort, anything helps, whether it's small, it's great. So it's not just either about donating money. If you have time to donate, if you have a special skill to donate, right? Maybe you're really great at marketing, or you love event planning, or spreading the word for the community, you name it. We also have some impacts out at the table there, which I would highly recommend grabbing some. We have a lot of them. I have a giant box of them. So if you feel passionate about this presentation and you want to grab some to pass out to family and friends, if you want to take 50 of them, let's say you work at a large office, please do take them and distribute them out. Together, we can definitely help to change the tides. One last thing to mention, we do have some other presentations coming up. If you enjoyed this presentation, if you have some friends that live in Los Osos, that is taking place on June 10th. We're also doing another presentation in Cambria on June 2nd. And we have our Morro Bay rally happening on June 8th. That is going to be for the celebration of the World Oceans Day. World Oceans Day. So we would love you guys to be a part of that as well. Let us be vigilant, let us be vocal, and let us ensure that our coastlines remain vibrant and alive, not just for us, but for future generations, and the entire ecosystem that enriches our planet. So we're gonna open it up for Q&A. Like I said, we are a very, very transparent company. We want you to ask questions. We would love to play Mythbusters with you too if you want, but yeah, we can go ahead and start the Q&A.